Versus 650? Is that you? Okay folks, jokes aside, this is the Moto Morini X-Cape 650cc parallel twin adventure bike that normally costs like $8,300. But right now, this thing's on sale for $7,300. It's got a TFT dash, Brembo brakes, fully adjustable suspension, and it's punching in the KLR price category. This is a serious contender for budget beginner ADV bikes with some seriously nice features. But the real question is this a Versa 650 in Mamma Mia red, or is it something unique that stands on its own? And that's what we're gonna find out today. So let's hit the road and let's see how this thing handles the twisties. Now, before we hit the road, I need to take a quick second and shout out the sponsor for today's video, Aura. Because the whole Spike's Corner business is entirely online, I take my security super seriously. And that means that you need to do stuff beyond just using two-factor authentication and making sure that your password has an exclamation point in it. Or it could actually troll through the dark web to find out what of your personal information might be out there. I actually found my social security number got released through a Facebook data breach. So now I have Aura monitoring my credit to make sure that nobody's opening credit cards or getting bike loans in my name. Aura also opts you out of data broker sales so that you get less of those annoying robocalls and spam text messages. I used to get like dozens of them a day. Seriously, it was really annoying. I wouldn't even pick up my phone anymore. The app also has a ton of other useful features, stuff like a VPN that you can activate with just the touch of a button, as well as a spending tracker, which is really helpful for me so that I can actually see what accounts are spending what money and how. Keep a lid on all of your personal information by clicking the link down in the description below or going over to aura.com/spikescorner and starting your 2-week free trial.
Okay folks, pulling out on the X-Cape here, hitting one of my favorite twisty roads because at the tail end of this there's a little off-road pit and we got to go play in the dirt because this is an ADV bike. So we're doing my ADV loop today. The first thing I want to talk about with this bike is how it handles on a twisty road, and I gotta say I'm genuinely impressed. The Versa 650, which you're going to hear mentioned a whole lot in this video, is a good handling motorcycle. And this is based on a lot of the, bones of that bike. However, this is a bigger, taller adventure bike with bigger wheels, and it's got Pirelli STRs on there, which are actually one of my favorite 60/40 tires. It's not really a true, awesome off-road tire, but it's a great off-road tire if you're doing 50/50 work. Let's talk more about this bike's twisty road acumen here. So the first thing I want to point out is the brakes. Holy cow, is the brake feel on this phenomenal. For a bike that is this cheap, usually the brakes, I don't want to say it's where a corner is cut, but they don't normally feel this damn good. The master cylinder feel is solid. It's a solid front end master cylinder feel. We do have a braided line here. Love braided lines. And we're sitting on Brembo calipers. They're not the biggest and fanciest Brembos in the world, but they feel great. And especially for somebody who rides adventure bikes on the street like they're giant supermotos. Yeah, this is a great setup. I love dive bombing corners with it because it's fun. It's how I like to ride these big bikes. And they handle nicely when you do that. This bike is no exception. And it's worth pointing out that we do have a very adjustable suspension on here. The suspension's handling my weight well, it's covering these bumps up great, and the bike it feels nice side to side. It feels feels really nice. I really like how it flows. It flows really nicely. It's fun. It's really fun. It's like riding a big supermoto. Some good stuff. Yeah, for sure. It feels great. Love it. But another thing you're going to hear me mention a lot in this video. Oh my God, the engine. Oh man. I'm gonna say that it seems like all of my issues with this engine are purely subjective, and I'm the only person on the planet who thinks this. But this is not a particularly engaging motor. The sound is sound. The motor goes. The motor makes the bike go faster. It does motor things, but it doesn't do it with any panache, no joie de vivre. I don't know, it's a motor. Now that being said, it delivers power. It delivers power in a great way. It's fun to rev it out. In the twisties, there's good torque, although it does feel like there's a little bit of a flat spot. Like if you dig into the power, you know, right around 4,000, 5,000 RPM, it doesn't feel like there's a lot there for you until you get a little bit higher up in the power band. Then it starts to wake up a little bit. It delivers power great. It engine brakes well. The transmission feel, holy cow, is the transmission feel good. It's classic Kawasaki transmission feel. It feels so snickety and so good. But the motor just But that's the twisty road. Now, because we're on an ADV bike, we have to take it in the dirt and see what it does. So let's go to my dirt loop and let's have some fun. And dirt time. I'm gonna do a couple of laps really fast just because I want to get to know this bike a little bit before I actually start communicating. But I will say, right off the jump, the first thing I noticed is how nice the seat is for the standing experience. And we'll talk about it more in a bit, but the seating position on here is, or the seat shape and the gas tank shape is really great for standing up and doing the ADV bike thing, which is awesome. Love that. I'm gonna go practice a couple of laps and come back to you with the results. Okay, now I've got my feet under me, so to speak. Let's start talking about the X-Cape off-road. So initially, the first thing I'm going to tell you is while the saddle shape and the gas tank shape is really good and the handlebars are really nice and wide, if you're my size, you need a riser. I'm definitely hunched over the handlebars, which is not a surprise for me. Almost no motorcycle right out of the gate fits me when I'm standing. So, you know, if you're maybe 4 inches shorter than I am, you're gonna be fine. Over these rocks, you can definitely feel that from the factory, the suspension is definitely more tuned for the street. It's bouncing quite a bit, and it's not really rolling over stuff. But you know what? I'm getting good enough bite out of the Pirellis that, you know, I'm having a good time out here. If I was genuinely struggling, I would tell you. And I'm enjoying this riding experience. The brakes in the dirt feel good. The only issue I guess I really have is the way it's geared. You can't crawl in second gear. Sometimes I like to be kind of low down in the RPM band in second gear. You can definitely feel this is a more street motor. Second gear is just not happy going slow. You'll stall it out. Maybe if you play with the clutch a little bit more, you'll be able to keep it alive, but sometimes I just like to poodle in second gear. I have to do a lot of work in first, and in first it can be a little bit of herky-jerky. But the nice thing is, when you're in like a nice flowy section like this, it feels really nice. So, you know, over more technical stuff, is it getting difficult? Sure. But, you know, most off-roading that adventure bikes see is like this. That being said, I'd be happy to take this bike places I take my KLR. So there's that. And then if you want to do it, you know, old man style, sitting down, it's pretty comfortable. The only thing is you run into that suspension issue. Let me go over those rocks again. You'll hear it in my voice. That rear shock is very much set up for the street. And it's gonna beat you up if you're doing it old man style. So you gotta stand up. But overall, this is a pretty decent little, you know, light duty adventure bike. And like, you know, the bike says adventuring on it, not adventure. So you gotta kind of color your expectations just a teensy bit, but I'm enjoying it. I really am. I'd give it a thumbs up. And for somebody who's, you know, who in Texas does the vast majority of riding on the street, this is the perfect kind of adventure bike for down here. With that being said, let's pull this thing over and let's talk about the specs and a couple of pros and cons on this bike before we get it out on the highway.
Alrighty folks, diving in with the specs on this X-Cape right here. This thing is powered by a 649cc parallel twin that's looking oddly familiar. My understanding is that this is a licensed Kawasaki 650 parallel twin, the one that is in the Z650, the Ninja 650, and the Versus 650. In this configuration, this motor's making 61 horsepower and 42 foot-pounds of torque. This thing, it's a little bit slow in the mid-range and it feels a little bit flat, as I mentioned in the Twisties. However, part of this bike's problem might be the fact that this thing weighs 470 pounds dry. That is a lot of mass for this motorcycle when it's fully fueled. It's got a big gas tank. There's a lot of stuff on this motorcycle, and you can add bags to it if you want. This thing is definitely more, as it says on the side of the bike right here, adventure touring. And you know what? For an adventure bike that's designed to spend a lot of time on the street, this thing handles remarkably well off-road despite its weight. Now, let's mount up on this thing and talk about some of the ergos. So, first and foremost, we're gonna address standing ergonomics because I'm actually genuinely surprised by how nice they are. There's a lot of room and the seat is shaped really well for you to grab it with your knees. This cutout here, I actually really like it. My only issue is because this thing is designed for street use, the pegs have like a 2-inch thick rubber insert. So I'm standing up a lot taller than I would otherwise be. And I mean, these have some nice claws on them so you can hook your boots in. As I mentioned off-road, this bike doesn't really fit me from the handlebars up. I definitely need taller bars on this if I'm gonna be comfortable. That's most adventure bikes. However, if I pop a squat, this thing, it's super comfortable. If you want a bike to ride on the street, to go to the office on, to just cruise around, adventure bikes are the place to be. And this thing, it's no exception. Very comfortable. And that brings me to the pros and cons on the X-Cape here. And the biggest con, in my opinion, has to be the motor. Don't get me wrong, this thing rides fine and it delivers great power. But like I mentioned in the Twisty Road section, it's a snooze. It's a very, very boring way to deliver power. However, again, like I mentioned, this is like third or fourth caveat like this, I seem to be the only one who cares. Just because I say that this motor doesn't have any joie de vivre doesn't mean that people aren't gonna like it. And again, this is a tried and true platform that works well. It's just, boy oh boy is it boring. However, everything else is awesome on this bike. The suspension feels great, the brakes feel great, and honestly, I really, really dig the looks on this thing. It's like a little bit Africa Twin mixed with a little bit Desert X, mixed with a little bit Tenere 700. I really like the look. And the build quality for this bike, it's right on par with everything that I would expect from a Japanese manufacturer building a bike at this price point. Everything feels great. However, there is one oversight on this. At the factory, they didn't glue the left-hand grip down. It rotates, and that isn't great. You guys just put some Renthal grip glue in there. Last thing I'm gonna mention, the TFT dash, it's adequate. It's totally fine. It doesn't really do much. I'm not noticing any real difference between the ride modes, and I am a little disappointed that when you put it in off-road mode, it doesn't turn off the ABS. I actually have to go in and pull the fuse on this, which is a bummer. With that being said, let's get this bike out on the highway and see how it feels. Spoiler alert, it's an adventure touring bike. It's probably gonna feel fine.
Pulling away on the highway, the biggest thing that I'm noticing here is this thing has the Versus 650 problem, and that is, well, I guess it would be better to say it's the Kawasaki 650 problem. These 650s, these 180-degree parallel twins from Kawasaki, they're buzzy. They're buzzy at, you know, 5,000 plus, and they don't really mellow out. This is one of the drawbacks of this motor. Despite everything else being really, really awesome about these in terms of reliability and, you know, all of that, it's not a very smooth place to sit. However, everything else about the ride on the highway, buttery smooth. That issue is compounded slightly by the fact that for this bike to have real roll-on, you have to be higher up in the power band. It's not to say that there isn't mid-range on this bike. Like here, let's shift up into 5th gear. We're about 5,000 RPM. Let's see about passing this Kia. Totally got the job done. But I was essentially at full throttle, right? I'm just sitting here, whee, and it's taken a minute for it to wake up. However, if I were to slow down and get it higher in the RPM band just to start, so let's say, let's do this in 3rd gear. It's already awake and it's happier. So that's one thing I am noticing about the power band on this is it's a lot more of a bike you have to rev out. And on the highway, if you have to rev it out, you're encountering the vibration problem a little bit more. Now, there's a couple of things you could do to, you know, help figure all that out. You could get yourself some isolating mounts and so forth. You could, you know, get some pegs with some squishier rubber, because I am feeling it in my toes quite a bit more than I'm feeling it in my hands. But, you know, that's just sort of the nature of this particular power plant. However, that's really my only complaint with this motorcycle on the highway, is you gotta wait a little bit to get the power, and once you have it, it's buzzy. That's it. Everything else, awesome. The seat is so comfortable. This is just like sitting in a freaking Barcalounger, man. This seat is awesome. I love this seat. It's comfortable, it's squishy, it's wide, it's about as good as any Harley Davidson saddle that I've ever sat in. It's really nice. And the riding position is so neutral on this bike. You know, it's just, everything is exactly where you'd expect it to be. For me, on the highway, I would actually end up rolling the handlebars back a little bit, just because it feels like they're a little far away, but that helps me out when I'm standing. So, you know, just a little give and take. One thing I really wish this bike had was cruise control. I understand why it doesn't. This thing currently is on sale for like $7,300. It's going on sale for the price of a KLR 650. This is so much better on the highway than any KLR 650, so I can forgive it not having cruise control, and I can just put a throttle lock on here. Now, the windscreen is actually doing a surprisingly good job for me. It's a little tough to use. I could stand it to be just a teensy bit taller and a teensy bit wider. But other than that, nah, dude, it's great. This is an excellent little highway cruiser. And again, for the price, how do you beat it? How are you going to find a bike that is as good as this for the price that it has? You can't. You absolutely can't. So with all that being said, let's pull the X-Cape over here and let's answer some Discord questions about it and see what the guys on Discord have to say.
Alrighty folks, it's time to do one of my favorite segments of these reviews. It's the Discord question and answer. If you would like to participate in this segment, all you got to do is click the link down in the description below. You'll get access to the Discord server where you can ask your questions about future bikes, or where you can see the full length review, because spoiler alert, you're watching an edited version right now. I end up talking for a lot more, and some of this stuff ends up on the cutting room floor. So if you wanted to see the full review, you can click that link down in the description below. Join up, it's the best way to support the channel. And with that being said, let's dive on in. Softwood Dachshund. Nice change, Corgi. Why would anybody get this over an NC750X? Well, honestly, the reason why you want to get this over an NC750X is because the NC750X is a giant nerd mobile. This definitely has some nerd energy, but it's definitely a fully fledged ADV bike, and honestly, I think it looks really cool. Dasco asking how much Morini is left in that thing. Also, have you seen the Milano they showed off at EICMA, 1200cc V-twin naked? I want one. Yes, I did see the Milano. I also saw the V-twin Super Adventure that they're producing. That's something I'm very excited for, because if it's the same sort of undercut the market style that this is, but with a bigger V-twin that sounds awesome, sign me up. That's going to be a great motorcycle, because this is a great motorcycle, but I can't stand the engine. As to your point of how much Morini is left, I think that this is an Italian styled and designed motorcycle, and you can sort of feel that by sitting on it and looking at it, but there's a lot of budget Japan in here too. You can definitely feel the Versa 650 bones underneath the Italian veneer. It's kind of like getting a flame maple cap put on a guitar. It changes the look of the fit thing, but it's still, you know, maybe like a basswood body instead of, you know, mahogany. Is that a bad thing? No, it definitely makes this motorcycle more approachable, but it's worth pointing out. Dasco, the real one this time, does it make the venerable Kawasaki 650 twin more characterful than Kawasaki does? No, it feels very much like the Versa 650. It's really hard to get away from how average the motor is to me. I'm trying to be nice to it, because I don't like the motor, but I keep telling you, so many other people do. I seem to feel like I'm an aberration here. But perhaps more to the point, is it just a red Versus X 650? No, it's not. It's definitely its own vehicle, and we'll talk more about that in the wrap up. Dasco Delito asking an actual question instead of the meme. Is it just the Desert X that you have at home? The Desert X is an excellent motorcycle, but for me, I wouldn't really take it off-road because it's too pretty and it's too Ducati. I don't feel comfortable beating up a Ducati. However, I would feel completely fine taking this anywhere I would take my KLR 650. I would be completely happy poodling this thing through Sturgis or the Mojave. I wouldn't have any issues. Magic Toaster asking, what type of motorcyclist do you see this bike being for? Well, again, it says it on the tail. It's adventure touring, so it's not really for the hardcore adventure rider. It's more for the rider who spends a lot of time on the street. They want a comfy bike, but perhaps one that they can play with off-road if they'd like to. A Dingo Took My Dasco asking, is the Moto Morini just a Versus with KLR suspension, or is it more than the sum of its parts? It's way better than the KLR. We've talked about the Versus enough. This is a better motorcycle than the KLR 650. It just is. It's got better suspension, it's got a better motor, it's got more modern features, and it can go faster. If I was going to do it over again, instead of having my KLR 650, especially for the kind of riding that I do here in Texas, this is the better motorcycle than my KLR. Do I occasionally miss not having the 21 off-road? Sure, but I've done fine on a 19. The Pan Am has a 19. The GS has a 19. I'm completely happy with this 19-inch front end, and it feels fine. I would take this over my KLR, especially since right now they're selling at the same price. And with that, let's hit the road and start wrapping up my thoughts, again, as if it wasn't obvious.
Okie dokie pokies, we're coming to the end of the day here on the Moto Morini X-Cape, and I've got to say, I've been having a fun time on this motorcycle, and it's not just because I'm on two wheels. I'm not just out here having a good time because it's a motorcycle and it's a beautiful day and it's a Wednesday and I'm not in the office. It is a good motorcycle and I'm having fun because it's a good motorcycle. If it was bad, I would tell you. This is not a bad motorcycle. This is a very good one, in fact. Especially when you consider the price. It's so hard to beat this thing for a budget ADV bike. This thing absolutely stomps the KLR 650. Now, will we see these, you know, wandering the post-apocalyptic Mad Max-scape with, you know, gimp masks on their face and playing giant flaming guitars in the nuclear wasteland? It's probably not going to last as long as a KLR. No. But I would rather have this over my KLR. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it. I would rather be on a Moto Morini X-Cape than on a KLR 650. This is a better motorcycle. It just is. It's the KLR killer. There's no reason to buy a KLR when you can buy this. This has more power. It's more comfortable for long rides. Arguably, it's a better looking motorcycle. Does it suffer a little bit off-road versus the KLR? Yes. But the on-road riding experience is just so much more pleasant. This is a really comfortable bike. It handles well. And I don't feel like I'm gonna tap it out at 70 miles an hour. It's still got some gas in the tank to get me up to, you know, 80 or 90. It's also a lot more stable at speed than my KLR 650 is. Not to mention the fact that you have fully adjustable suspension, you've got Brembo brakes on here, you've got the TFT, which, while it's really not the most amazing TFT display I've ever seen, it's cooler than just a basic LCD setup. I like the fact that you can pair your phone to it and you've got maps and navigation and stuff. This is a modern beginner adventure bike with all the trimmings that you would want. I would not hesitate to recommend this to an ADV beginner. Now let's talk about the motor. I reached out to Ian at Big Rock Moto. I texted him completely out of the blue. I was just like, hey dude, I know you had a Moto Morini X-Cape. What do you think of the motor? What do you think of the motor? And I didn't tell him what I thought about it. I just told him I was on one and I wanted to hear what he had to say. His statement was boring, but it gets the job done. That's the perfect way to describe it. This is a very boring motor, but it's fun enough in the streets. It's delivering good power. It's fine on the highway. If you downshift a little bit, you know, 5th and 6th gear, it feels like you have to work it a little bit harder. But, you know, you get it moving, and this bike will boogie. I just can't help but sit here and wish that it had a better motor, a more interesting engine note. This is the most adequate parallel twin on the street. There you have it. But despite this this engine's boringness, the rest of the motorcycle elevates the package beyond the shortfalls of this engine in terms of the riding experience. This is a great package, and it's so cool that it's so crazy cheap. Like, again, right now it's $7,300, or you can get the full, you know, saddlebags and stuff, but I would just get the bike, because, you know, you're not going to want big panniers unless you're just cruising on the highway, because if you're going off-road, you kind of want squishy bags. So I would just get squishy bags, and I would take the money off this motorcycle. The money that you save on this bike, by getting it super cheap, you can turn into, you know, nice squishy panniers. Or, you know, you just go and grab a Nelson rig Trails End, which is what I have on my KLR, which, by the way, if you want, click the link down in the description below. They have a discount code. Big thanks to Nelson Rig for that. And I use Nelson Rig stuff all the time. Would not hesitate to recommend it. Is this the bestest ADV of all time? No. But I would rather have it over my KLR 650. And that right there is how I'm going to leave this video. Let me know your thoughts on the Moto Morini X-Cape down below. Is this something you're interested in? Would you be interested in starting on this as your first foray into ADV riding? Would you use this as a street bike? Let me know all your thoughts down in the description below. Yeah, even revving this thing out, it's not solving the issues with it. Just with it sounded boring. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.